It was supposed to be just another routine flight, another mundane day in the life of Kate Turner, a liberal-leaning flight attendant with a knack for speaking her mind. She had been working for the airline for over 5 years, and her progressive ideals were well known to her colleagues, though they didn't always sit well with some of the passengers. Kate had always prided herself on remaining polite, professional, and neutral on the job, but that was about to change. The flight was scheduled to fly from Boston to Washington, D.C., and the passengers were beginning to board. Among them, Kate noticed a familiar face, Karoline Leavitt, a Republican congresswoman who had made waves with her outspoken views on immigration, healthcare, and social issues. Kate knew who she was immediately. Karoline's controversial stances had earned her both ardent supporters and vocal critics, and Kate was in the latter camp. She had never been shy about sharing her opinions on conservative politicians, especially when it came to someone as vocal as Leavitt. As the boarding process continued, Kate found herself walking down the aisle, scanning each passenger's ticket to ensure a smooth boarding process. When she reached Karoline, her stomach twisted. "Excuse me, ma'am," Kate said, her tone even but firm. "I'm afraid you can't board this flight." Karoline looked up at her with a raised eyebrow, clearly taken aback. "Excuse me? I'm in my seat, and I have a valid ticket. What do you mean I can't board?" Kate hesitated for a moment. This was more than just a simple case of a passenger having an issue with her ticket. Kate knew the woman seated before her was Karoline Leavitt, a figure she had strong opinions about. "I'm sorry, but I just don't think I can allow someone with your views on board. It goes against my personal beliefs and what I stand for," Kate replied, her voice quivering slightly but resolute. The words hung in the air like a thick fog. Karoline blinked a few times, processing what had just been said. The other passengers began to murmur, a mixture of confusion and disbelief. "You're refusing to let me board based on my political views?" Karoline said, her tone icy. "Are you serious?" Kate nodded. "Yes, ma'am. I'm afraid I am." The tension in the cabin escalated as Karoline stood, her face reddening with anger. "This is outrageous. You have no right to deny me service. I will be speaking to your supervisor." "I'm just following what I believe is right," Kate said, feeling a surge of adrenaline. "I don't think I can allow someone who's contributed to the kind of divisiveness you have onto this flight." Before Karoline could respond, the gate agent, a tall man named Greg, arrived. He had been watching the interaction from afar and immediately stepped in to defuse the situation. "Ma'am, we need you to board." "Please, don't make a scene," Greg said, addressing Kate. But Kate stood her ground. She looked at Karoline one last time and said, "I just don't think it's right for you to be on this flight. Not with what you represent." Greg's face went pale. He turned to Kate, his voice growing more serious. "Kate, this is not how we handle things. Let's step outside." The murmurs from the passengers had grown louder now, and it was clear that word was spreading fast. Kate's heart pounded in her chest as she followed Greg toward the jet bridge, away from the ever-watchful eyes of the passengers. "Kate, what the hell are you doing?" Greg snapped once they were out of earshot. "You can't just refuse someone boarding because of their political views. We have a policy. You can't do this." "I know what I did, and I don't regret it," Kate replied, her voice unwavering. "It's my right to take a stand for what I believe in." Greg looked frustrated. "No, it's not. And you've just caused a massive problem. You need to apologize to her and get back to your job before this becomes a PR nightmare for the airline." Before Kate could respond, she noticed a small group of supervisors walking toward her. Their stern expressions made her stomach drop. The supervisors approached quickly, their expressions serious, almost menacing. Kate felt her palms sweat, her heart racing. She knew this wasn't just a momentary disagreement anymore, this was bigger than her principles. This was about her job, her career, and everything she had worked for. But in that moment, she stood firm. One of the supervisors, a woman named Michelle, spoke first. "Kate, we need to talk," she said, her voice calm but carrying an underlying sense of authority. Kate swallowed hard but nodded. "I know, I had to do what I thought was right. She shouldn't have been allowed to board." Michelle's expression didn't shift. "Kate, you can't let personal beliefs interfere with your work. You know the rules. No matter who the passenger is, you're here to serve them with professionalism and respect." Kate opened her mouth to argue, but Michelle raised a hand to stop her. "I understand you may have strong feelings about her politics," Michelle continued, her tone softer but still stern. "But that doesn't excuse what you did. You're not in a position to make those kinds of decisions. It's not about your opinions, it's about the airline's policies and customer service." Another supervisor, a man named Tom, spoke up. "This is a serious breach of conduct, Kate. We've had complaints already. Passengers are recording what happened, and this is going to make the news. Do you understand the kind of trouble you're in?" Kate's mind raced. She hadn't thought about the fallout. She had been so caught up in her own convictions that she hadn't considered the bigger picture. She had just wanted to stand up for her beliefs, to take a stand against what she saw as dangerous ideologies. But now, it felt like she had made a reckless mistake. I didn't mean for this to happen," Kate muttered. "I just couldn't let her board. I feel like it's a moral obligation." Michelle sighed, stepping closer to Kate. "It's not your place to decide who deserves to fly, especially based on their political views. You're paid to ensure everyone is treated equally, no matter what side of the aisle they fall on." Tom added, his voice more direct, "Kate, this could end your career with us. You need to understand the severity of this situation. This isn't just about your personal beliefs anymore, it's about the integrity of the airline and the passengers' trust." Kate felt a knot form in her stomach. It was clear they were done trying to reason with her. They were more focused on damage control, and she was the source of the damage. "Do you want to keep your job?" Michelle asked, her voice sharp. Kate nodded slowly, though she didn't know if she could genuinely go back to a job that demanded this level of silence when it came to standing up for what she believed in. Just as she opened her mouth to respond, her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out, quickly checking the screen. A notification from a news app caught her eye. Her heart skipped a beat. Breaking news: flight attendant refuses boarding to GOP Congresswoman Karoline Leavitt due to political views. The story was already out there. She could feel the weight of her mistake settling on her shoulders like a heavy cloak. It had gone viral. There was no turning back now. Michelle and Tom exchanged a look, then turned back to Kate. "We'll be in touch," Michelle said coldly. "But don't expect this to blow over quickly." Before Kate could say anything else, they walked away, leaving her alone in the empty hallway, her future hanging in the balance. As she watched them disappear, Kate's mind swirled with regret and confusion. Had she been too extreme in her actions? Or had she simply acted out of a deep sense of injustice? Either way, she knew one thing for certain: this was far from over. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Kate was sent home immediately, pending an investigation. Her phone didn't stop buzzing with notifications, each one more intense than the last. News outlets were picking up the story faster than she could process it. Social media was ablaze, some people condemning her actions, others praising her for standing up to what they saw as political extremism. She couldn't escape it, no matter where she went. That evening, as Kate sat in her apartment staring at the TV, the sound of her phone buzzing again drew her attention. It was an email from the airline's Human Resources Department. "Dear Kate Turner, after careful review of the incident earlier today, we regret to inform you that your actions have been deemed a serious violation of company policy. As a result, we have decided to terminate your employment with immediate effect. We understand that emotions ran high in the moment, but our commitment to providing equitable service to all passengers, regardless of political affiliation, is non-negotiable. Please arrange to return any company property, including your uniform, at your earliest convenience. We wish you the best in your future endeavors. Sincerely, Human Resources Department. The words blurred as Kate read the email again and again, each time hoping she'd misread something. But it was true. She was fired. Her hands trembled as she placed her phone down. A cold emptiness settled over her. She had acted on principle, believing that her actions were justified. But now, she realized just how much of her life had been wrapped up in that uniform, in that career. The loss hit her harder than she expected. She wasn't just losing a job. She was losing her sense of purpose. Kate's phone buzzed again. This time, it was a text message from her best friend, Alicia. I saw the news. Are you okay? I can't believe they fired you for that. I'm proud of you for standing up for what you believe in, but I know this must be tough. Want to talk? Kate stared at the message, unsure how to respond. On one hand, she felt proud of what she had done, but on the other hand, she couldn't shake the feeling that she had just thrown away everything she had worked for. Her phone buzzed once more. This time, it was a call from her mother. Kate hesitated for a moment before answering. Hey, Mom, Kate said, trying to keep her voice steady. Katie, her mother's voice was filled with concern. I saw what happened. Is it true? Did they really fire you? Kate sighed. Yeah, Mom. They did. I don't even know what to think right now. Oh, sweetheart, her mother said gently, you know you've always been passionate about your beliefs, but sometimes it's better to keep certain things to yourself. You can't let your job be about politics. You have to think about your future. Kate felt a lump form in her throat. Her mother didn't understand. She couldn't. To Kate, this wasn't just about politics. It was about standing up for what was right. But the people she had once trusted, the companies she had worked for, didn't see it that way. They saw her as a liability, a troublemaker. It felt like everything she had believed in was being torn apart, piece by piece. I don't know if I can just move on, Mom. I feel like I did the right thing, Kate said, her voice wavering. But now, it's like I've lost everything. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Finally, her mother spoke, her voice softer this time. I know you did what you thought was right, Kate. But sometimes, we have to learn the hard way that the world doesn't always work the way we want it to. You'll find your way again, sweetheart. But for now, just take a deep breath, okay? Everything's going to be all right. Kate wasn't sure if she believed her mother's words, but she nodded anyway. Thanks, Mom. After the call, she sank back into the couch, her mind racing. Was there really a way back from this? Could she rebuild her life after what she'd done? As the night wore on, the reality of her situation began to settle in. She had made a stand, but the cost was higher than she had imagined. She had lost her job, her career, and perhaps the future she had once envisioned for herself. But she couldn't let it end like this. There had to be a way forward. She would find it. No matter what it took. The next few days felt like a whirlwind of regret, confusion, and, oddly enough, a deep sense of clarity. Kate had made her stand, and now she was left with the consequences. The story had exploded across the media, and there was no way to escape it. On the surface, the public seemed divided. Some praised her for taking a stand against what they saw as political extremism, while others criticized her for letting her personal beliefs get in the way of her job. The debate raged on, and Kate felt like a pawn in a game much larger than herself. But as the days wore on, Kate couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that perhaps she hadn't done enough, at least not in the right way. Standing up for what she believed in was important, but was it worth the cost of alienating herself from her entire career and future? She spent hours online, reading about the public fallout, dissecting every comment, every opinion. Some were supportive, while others were downright hostile. But amidst all the noise, Kate began to realize something. she was not the only one facing the consequences of this divisive political climate. People all over the country, in all walks of life, were being torn apart by the same polarization. On the third day after her firing, Kate received an unexpected phone call. It was from a journalist named Sarah Jensen, who had been covering the story since the beginning. Sarah had seen the social media buzz, and, intrigued by Kate's stand, wanted to know more about what had driven her to refuse Karoline Leavitt boarding. At first, Kate was hesitant, unsure whether speaking to the press was a good idea. But something told her that it was time to take control of her narrative, rather than letting the media shape it for her. "I've been thinking a lot about this," Kate said when Sarah asked for an interview. "I don't regret what I did, but I regret how it went down. I never wanted it to escalate like this." Sarah listened patiently. "Tell me more about why you felt it was necessary to refuse boarding. What was going through your mind?" Kate paused. It wasn't just about Karoline Leavitt. It was about everything she represents. The way she's been part of the polarization, the dehumanization of people who don't agree with her. "I know I'm not supposed to let personal beliefs influence my work, but I couldn't sit there and let someone who stands for that kind of hate get on the plane without saying something. It felt like a moral obligation, like I was part of something bigger." The interview took a few hours, with Sarah asking probing questions, some Kate wasn't sure she could answer. But as they wrapped up, Kate felt lighter, like she was finally taking control of her story. The interview was published later that week, and to Kate's surprise, it wasn't the public backlash she had expected. People seemed to respond to her vulnerability, her openness about her internal struggle. The story went viral, but this time, it felt different. The response was more nuanced. Many praised her honesty and her willingness to stand up for what she believed in, even if they didn't agree with her actions. Others, still angry, attacked her for being unprofessional. But one thing was clear: Kate wasn't going to be silenced. The days that followed were filled with more media appearances, more interviews, and more scrutiny. But amidst it all, Kate began to see a glimmer of hope. A chance to reshape her life, to move forward on her terms. She started to get calls from people offering her opportunities, speaking engagements, work with advocacy groups, even a job offer from an airline willing to hire her back, but under the condition that she agreed to a retraining program on professionalism. Kate thought about it for a moment. It wasn't the path she had imagined for herself, but it was a path forward. And for the first time since the incident, Kate allowed herself to smile. She had made her stand, and though it had cost her dearly, it had also opened doors she hadn't expected. That night, after an exhausting day of interviews, Kate sat on her couch, reading the comments on the latest article. The opinions were still divided, but there was something in the mix that made her feel like maybe, just maybe, she was on the right track. It wasn't over yet. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time since the incident, Kate felt hopeful. She had learned a hard lesson, that standing up for what you believe in doesn't always come with easy answers or smooth consequences. But she had survived it. And that meant something. As the weeks passed, Kate found herself caught between the echoes of her past decisions and the reality of her future. The media frenzy that had surrounded her firing had died down somewhat, but the ripples were still there. She was no longer just Kate Turner, the flight attendant. She had become a symbol of resistance for some, a cautionary tale for others. The political climate had shifted, and in some ways, so had Kate. But the fallout, while painful, also gave her a new sense of purpose. The speaking engagements had started rolling in, mostly from activist groups and political forums that admired her courage, if not her methods. She spoke about standing up for what you believe in, about the dangers of political polarization, and the struggles of trying to navigate a world that felt increasingly divided. It wasn't the career she'd once dreamed of, but it was hers to shape now, and for the first time in a long time, she was in control. One cold morning in late October, Kate was invited to speak at a community gathering in Washington, D.C. The event was small, just a few hundred people, but the message was clear: bridging the divide between personal conviction and professional responsibility had become an urgent conversation. Kate was the perfect example of someone who had been caught in the crossfire. As she prepared to take the stage, Kate felt a wave of nerves wash over her. But this time, they were different. She wasn't scared of what people would think. She was nervous because, for the first time, she was being heard on her own terms. She had the power to control the narrative now, and with that came both a sense of freedom and responsibility. The crowd was warm, receptive, even. Kate took a deep breath before stepping up to the microphone. "Thank you for having me here today," she began, her voice steady. "I know I've been at the center of a lot of debates over the past few months. Some of you might agree with what I did, some of you might not. But here's the truth, I'm just like you. I'm a person trying to make sense of a world that feels broken, a world that's been divided into opposing camps, where everyone is shouting but no one is listening." She paused, looking around at the faces in the crowd. She could see the mixture of emotions, some sympathetic, others skeptical, but all open to what she had to say. "I've spent a lot of time thinking about what happened, about why I made the choice I did," she continued. "And the truth is, I wasn't just refusing Karoline Leavitt boarding because I disagreed with her politics. It wasn't just about her views. It was about what she represented, a culture of hate and division that I couldn't in good conscience contribute to. But here's the thing I've learned, standing up for what you believe in is not just about being right, it's about being responsible, too." Kate felt the weight of her words. When we choose to act, we have to understand that the consequences of those actions don't just affect us. They affect everyone around us. And sometimes, those consequences are bigger than we can imagine. The crowd was quiet, hanging on her every word. "I've been given a second chance," she said, her voice softening. "A chance to rebuild. To be better. To learn from my mistakes, and to help others see that the path forward isn't through division, it's through conversation. Understanding. And compromise." The room filled with a gentle applause, and Kate felt a weight lift from her shoulders. For the first time in months, she felt at peace with her journey. She hadn't just survived the fallout from her actions, she had learned from it. She had grown. The next few months were a mix of challenges and small victories. Kate continued to speak at forums, her name now synonymous with political discourse and the complexities of standing up for one's beliefs in the face of harsh consequences. She took on a few consulting jobs with companies who wanted to better understand how to manage workplace diversity and inclusion, lessons learned the hard way from her own experience. And slowly but surely, she started to rebuild her life. Her former colleagues from the airline, some of whom had been disappointed by her actions, began reaching out. It wasn't easy for them to reconcile the person they had known with the person Kate had become, but time had a way of healing those wounds. She wasn't the same woman who had refused to let Karoline Leavitt board that plane. She was someone new, someone who had learned the importance of accountability and compassion. But despite everything, Kate couldn't forget the lesson that had shaped her path: you can stand up for what you believe in, but you have to be ready for the consequences. You have to be ready to rebuild, to evolve, and to listen, especially when the world around you is as divided as it's ever been. And in that, Kate found her redemption. Not in the applause, not in the media attention, but in the quiet moments of reflection, knowing that she had truly found her way forward. It had been nearly a year since Kate had been fired from her job as a flight attendant. In that time, the world had changed, and so had Kate. Her life had taken on a new direction, one that was far removed from the life she had once known, but a life that felt more authentic and purposeful. Kate had spent the months after her firing slowly rebuilding herself, not just in terms of career, but personally. The speaking engagements had led her to a broader platform, where she found herself on panels with political analysts, activists, and even former colleagues who had once been critical of her. Her voice, once a solitary whisper, was now being heard in rooms full of decision-makers, where the discussions weren't just about right versus left, but about finding common ground in a fractured world. One of the most important changes, however, was Kate's newfound focus on community. She had shifted her attention from the polarized political debates to tangible, local action. She had started a nonprofit aimed at fostering dialogue between people with differing political views, an effort to bridge the gap that had left so many isolated and angry. The goal wasn't to change minds or force compromise, it was about creating spaces for people to listen, to understand, and to humanize one another. Her days were now filled with meetings, workshops, and planning sessions. She spent time with people from all walks of life, listening to their stories and connecting with them in ways she never could have before. Her experiences, both the painful and the enlightening, became the foundation of the organization she had started. Kate had also found a new sense of balance. In her early days of activism, she had been consumed by the urgency of it all. She had been certain that her way was the only way. But over time, she had learned that lasting change didn't happen in the heat of the moment, it happened in the quiet spaces of understanding, in the long conversations, and in the slow, patient work of rebuilding trust. As she sat in the office of her nonprofit, reviewing the plans for the upcoming year, she received a call that would once again change the course of her life. It was from her old supervisor, Greg, the one who had tried to mediate the situation with Karoline Leavitt on that fateful day. "Kate," Greg's voice was surprisingly warm over the phone, "I wanted to reach out. I know we left things on, not great terms, and I just wanted to say I've been following what you've been doing. I'm impressed. You've really turned things around." Kate was silent for a moment. She hadn't expected this. "Thanks, Greg. That means a lot," she replied, her voice soft. "I never imagined things would go the way they did. But I had to do something." "I get it," Greg said. "And look, I'm not calling to rehash the past. I'm calling because, we're hiring again. And we'd like to offer you a position. Not as a flight attendant, obviously, but something more in line with what you've been doing. Helping with diversity, inclusion, and conflict resolution. I know the circumstances were difficult, but we recognize that you have skills and experience now that could be valuable." Kate paused, a flood of emotions rushing through her. This wasn't what she had expected. She had never thought that the airline that had fired her would reach out, let alone offer her a role. "I don't know," she said slowly, almost to herself. "It's been a long time since I thought about working in an airline again." "I understand," Greg said, "but it's not just about the airline anymore. It's about what you can bring to a larger conversation. We need people who can bring fresh perspectives. I know it's a big ask, but we're hoping you'll consider it." For the first time in months, Kate felt conflicted. She had grown so far beyond that life, the life of flight attendants, uniforms, and rigid policies, but something about Greg's words lingered. Maybe this was an opportunity to continue her work, to bridge the gap in a way she hadn't anticipated. She could still fight for the same principles, but from a different angle, one that might reach people she never could have reached on her own. "I'll think about it," Kate said. "Thank you for reaching out." After hanging up, Kate sat back in her chair, the weight of the decision pressing down on her. She had spent the last year building something entirely new, but the offer Greg made wasn't just a job, it was a chance to influence a system from within, to change the very environment that had once cast her aside. Kate had learned many things in her time away from the airline. She had learned that redemption wasn't a straight line, but rather a winding path with many unexpected turns. She had learned that standing up for what you believe in sometimes meant losing things, but it also meant gaining a deeper understanding of yourself and the world around you. As she stared out the window at the city skyline, she realized that this decision was just another part of that journey. Whether she accepted the offer or not, Kate had finally come to terms with one truth: she didn't need to know exactly where the road would take her. She just needed to keep walking. Months passed since the conversation with Greg. Kate had carefully considered his offer, weighed the impact of returning to her former employer, and reflected on everything she had achieved since the firing. As much as she had grown beyond her old life, as much as she believed in her nonprofit and the new direction she had found, she couldn't shake the feeling that maybe, just maybe, there was still unfinished business within the system she had once been a part of. The airline industry had been a significant part of her life, and while she had left it, it hadn't completely left her. Kate decided to accept the position Greg had offered her. It wasn't a return to her old role as a flight attendant, but a newly created position focused on diversity, inclusion, and fostering understanding within the company. It wasn't about flying again, it was about fixing what had been broken and bridging the gaps between the airline's policies and the very people it served. Her first few days back at the airline were strange. It wasn't just the fact that the uniform felt different now, more like a costume than a symbol of her identity. It was the shift in perspective that she carried with her. She wasn't just a worker here anymore, she was an advocate for change. She had a seat at the table now, and she planned to use it. Kate quickly got to work, meeting with employees at every level of the company. She wasn't there to point fingers or assign blame, she was there to listen, to understand, and to help. It was hard at times. Change is never easy, especially when you're working with a large institution steeped in tradition. But Kate had learned patience in her time away from the industry. She had learned that change takes time and that every conversation, every small step, matters. Slowly, Kate began to see the fruits of her efforts. Policies that once seemed rigid and unchangeable began to loosen. Training sessions were implemented to help staff engage with passengers from all backgrounds. The company started to address the importance of mental health, and efforts to promote dialogue between opposing viewpoints started to take root. Despite the progress, there were still moments of tension. The political divide that had led to her firing was still very much alive, and some of her colleagues resented the changes she was pushing. But Kate knew this was just part of the journey. It wasn't going to be perfect, and it wasn't going to be easy, but it was real. One day, several months into her new role, Kate stood in the conference room where, not long ago, she had been escorted out by the same supervisors who had dismissed her for her actions. Now, she was leading a meeting about diversity, conflict resolution, and how the airline could do better in accommodating people with differing views. It was an incredible full-circle moment. Greg, who had become a strong ally, sat across from her, smiling as he nodded in approval. He had supported her every step of the way, and it was clear to him how much Kate had transformed not only her own life but the company's culture. "Kate," Greg said as the meeting wrapped up, "I know this hasn't been easy, and I know you've had your doubts. But you're doing more than I ever expected. You're truly making a difference." Kate looked around the room, at the people who once would have never given her ideas the time of day, now engaged in discussion, eager to move forward. Her heart swelled with a quiet pride. "I didn't do this alone," she said. "This has been a team effort. And every day, I'm reminded that we all have a role to play in making things better. The key is to keep talking, even when it's hard. Keep listening, even when we don't agree." As Kate walked out of the conference room, she felt a deep sense of fulfillment. This was the moment she had been working toward, not just to rebuild her career, but to make a lasting change in an industry that had once rejected her. It wasn't the destination she had imagined, but it was the right one. Kate had come full circle. She had started her journey fighting for what she believed in, without thinking about the consequences. But in the end, it was her willingness to adapt, to grow, and to build something new that had brought her back here. She had found her redemption not in running away from the past but in confronting it, using it as the foundation to build a more inclusive, compassionate future. As she looked out the window of the airline office, her mind at peace, Kate knew this was only the beginning. There was more work to be done, more conversations to be had, and more bridges to build. But she was no longer afraid of what lay ahead. She was ready.